Hello there, my name is Sarah Dochman. I'm going to be the teacher for this 211 this summer. I've been a writing teacher at UAF for 20 years, had a lot of different jobs, but all of them involve teaching writing to some extent. This is my second semester teaching 211 as an e-learning class. I feel like, I ironed out some of the kinks that we had going on the first round, and I'm really excited. I think I got the assignments all set up so that they will really help you write good papers. So everything that you'll need for the class is on the WordPress site or in the textbook. Get the textbook as soon as possible. It's really going to hinder you to not have that textbook as soon as possible. Some of the literature we can access online, but none of the instructional stuff that's in the chapters of the textbook are online. So it's really important that you get the textbook. Get familiar with all of the tabs on the website. I tried very hard to include only information that's actually necessary and not any extra stuff. So really look through the tabs. The information in there is to help you, and I think it will help you. And the more you know about what's going on in those tabs before you get started, the easier you'll be able to find stuff as you need it. I want to talk just a little bit about academic writing about literature and what that actually means. The academic part, of course, means that you're writing for an academic audience, which means you're using a standard system of English. We just call it standard English. It follows particular grammar rules. It follows particular sort of formatting and punctuation type rules, and these rules are standard across most of the disciplines in academia. So what writing for an academic audience means is that you're writing with an informed opinion. So you have an opinion, but you also inform yourself so that you are educated. And that's the big thing with academia, of course, is that you know what you're talking about. You're not just making stuff up. So what that means is that in the context of literature, that you've read literature, that you've analyzed it, that means you've asked questions about it, you've found answers. You've brought all of that together with an idea and an audience in mind, so the audience will be able to follow the idea that you're focusing on, and a lot of people call that a thesis. You've probably heard it called a thesis. I like to call it a controlling idea. Sometimes I call it a thesis. You'll know what I'm talking about. It's basically the main idea that's controlling your paper and how you're going to organize your paper and what kind of information you're going to include and what kind of information you don't really need to include because you assume that your audience has also read the text that you're writing about. We'll talk more about that later. So the academic part also involves sources because you have to be an educated writer, so you need to know a little bit about what you're writing about. You need to know what other people have said, or you need to know a little bit more about the subject matter, the author, the topic, the era, what kind of clothes do people wear then, how realistic is it? I mean, if you care about realism, which you don't have to. Any kind of questions that you have, you'll be researching those questions. You'll be finding answers to those questions, and those are your sources. Academic writing has to document its sources, and I am sure if you have come to this point that you're in a 211 class, you know about documenting sources, so you're just going to be continuing doing that. In academia, we document sources using documentation styles. We follow patterns for how to provide the information. And in this class we'll use MLA, the Modern Language Association documentation style, and that's because we're writing about literature. And the documentation styles are discipline specific, which means that in the different disciplines you're going to use different styles. Now you may be, a psychology major and you always use APA, and why should you have to use MLA? You use MLA because you're writing about literature. It doesn't matter what documentation style you have to follow, it's the same kind of thing. You have to follow the rules, you have to follow a pattern, and that's what you're going to learn how to do in this class. It will be easy to follow somebody else's documentation style once you've learned how to follow MLA. I have a lot. So the literature part basically just means that our topic of study is literature, so we're going to read plays, we're going to read poems, we're going to read stories, and we're going to study them, and then you may find that you want to learn more about a historical era or something like that, and then your paper might have a little bit more of a historical bent to it because of that. It depends on what you're interested in. If you are, for example, interested in psychology, you might be more interested in studying character than setting or something like that. So those are just things to consider for the future. So a lot of times when I teach a literature class or a writing about literature class, students express some frustration not at being asked to look for hidden meanings, I guess. And I'm not asking you to look for hidden meanings. I don't think that there are hidden meanings. I think that there are many meanings. And what I'm asking you to do is to find your own meaning, not some defined meaning that I'm trying to get you to guess at, not some measurable meaning, but a meaning that rings true to you. Now, of course, to be academic, it has to ring true to you and to other people. You have to show how it could ring true for other people as well, which means you become informed about the topic that you have an opinion on, and then you also add your interpretation of the text itself. So use the text to show that this is a plausible meaning. This is a meaning somebody could get under these circumstances. So the text, cannot be changed to be saying things that it's not. However, texts can be ambiguous. There's, metaphor, there's analogy, there's all kinds of tricks going on in texts. So, it's a bit fun and complicated. How a text is true to you is really going to depend on your own interests. If we read a story about a race car driver and you don't care about race car drivers, but, they also were talking about trees or something, and these are bad examples, but your interest is going to drive your paper. Your interest is the most important thing. The paper topics are extremely open. The only idea here is that you engage the literature, which means you have to read it. You do not go and read like Sparks Notes or something. That's not going to help you. You cannot make your own opinion based on somebody else's synopsis of something. So I give everybody a lot of options, and I think there's something for everyone in the literature that I've assigned. So when I say that you need to find your own meaning and a meaning that is true to you, I don't mean that you have to get into your deepest, darkest personal secrets or tell me anything personal at all. I don't need to know anything personal about you that you don't want to share. You may have interpretations about the literature that are based in very personal things, and you can find your own way of what's comfortable for you to share about that, or you just make your argument not personal if you don't want to go there, But your personal experience shapes very, very much how you read something, so you do want to, at least for yourself, search inside. What is it that's making you interpret things this way? If half the class really loves a character and half the class really hates them, there are other reasons for that than author-inspired reasons. That is, the author's intent is very much not my concern. However, we don't want to just be like, oh, the words can mean whatever we want, So the work itself has to work with what you think it says. What the author wanted it to say is irrelevant, because the text is now in existence. So that's sort of my philosophy about the thing, and the reason I see it that way is that what would be the point of reading if we aren't reading for our own understanding, for our own betterment? I'm not reading to understand Shakespeare. I'm not that interested necessarily in his thoughts as much as what I learn about the world through the words that he gave us. Just as an example, we're not actually reading any Shakespeare in here. So once you have your own idea about the literature, the most important thing is to have your own idea about what's going on in the literature. Then you start branching out and looking for the answers to some of the questions that will help make that idea sort of fleshed out and big enough for a paper. So that's the most important thing. Your idea is the most important thing. There's lots of questions in the book and stuff that can help you get to an idea, and everything is built into the class. So I'm not asking you to have ideas like that. I'm asking you to write and write and write a lot of little things until you have an idea. So the way the assignments are designed is that everything builds on what came before. You're encouraged to rework writing from assignment to assignment if that topic still interests you, if you still have something to bring to the topic. You're encouraged to start over completely with each new paper if you've lost interest. Some of the papers you have to start over because they have different kind of requirements. But in general, we're looking at this as a paper trajectory. You have a researched essay at the end that may be put together from various pieces of previous papers that you've written, or maybe one paper that you've written, you're like, I'm going to work on this one, I'm going to make this a researched essay. But because the assignments build on each other, none of these assignments, in my intention anyway, are just going to be like busy work that you have to do. Everything is practice. Everything is really, really geared toward building skills and learning the entire process of writing a paper, not writing a paper at the last minute and handing it in because it's good enough, but like really getting into the meat and heart of what you are trying to say and saying it with eloquence, with beauty, in a way that a reader really wants to read it and will understand what you were saying and will be contributing, you know, in that way to a conversation, a broader conversation about literature. And any conversation about literature is already a conversation about humanity. So, I mean, I think this stuff is really relevant. Your interest is the most important thing, because good writing never comes from lack of interest. So your interest is really important for good writing to result. And because I firmly believe that good writing comes from individuals, I teach with a great emphasis on individual strength and improvement, which means that I look at what you've done, I know how you write, and then I try to help you write the way you write, in a way that's either more standard or more beautiful or whatever it is that it seems like you could stand to improve, basically. So with this emphasis on individual strength and improvement, all of my grading comments are intended as instruction for you and as alternative ways to think about a problem or issue that you raised, or an interpretation that you have, just alternative ways for you to look at things. So when I'm writing an alternative opinion about something, it doesn't mean that I'm arguing with you or saying that you need to do it this way or you're wrong. It means I'm asking you to consider this other opinion. How does that then refine your opinion? So because of the emphasis on individuality and your individual writing habits, because writing is extraordinarily individual, I expect your individual and specific habits that I've been trying to help you with over time to improve. You have a record of everything. You'll submit your papers in Drive. The papers will stay there through the entire semester. You'll be able to go back and see what kind of comments you got on previous papers. You'll be able to see where I pointed you to for assistance. And then I'm going to expect that you're actually going to use those resources and get better in those areas, or you're going to let me know why you totally disagree. And we can have a conversation about that. Nothing is set in stone. A couple things are set in stone, but most things in the writing situation are not set in stone and are things that we can discuss. What is the meaning of making these changes? What is the effect of making these changes? And why are you attached to your way? Which is valid, but why? What's your reason? So when I assign points to your essay, I consider individual improvement really, really heavily, which means that the same exact paper could get an A or could get a B based on where you started, right? So if you have paper A and you really have gone through and really worked really, really hard on like the 3 areas that you've really been struggling with, and there's like nothing in there. In those 3 areas, you're great, you're awesome now. That paper's gonna get an A, even if maybe somebody else would get a B on that paper because they are still struggling with some issues that we have been addressing in multiple papers before we ever got to this point. So improvement is a large part of your grade. It's not going to like make or break your passing of a class, but certainly going to make a difference between a B and an A, or a C and a B, depending on how you're doing. Okay, so all of the comments that I read on your papers, obviously you need to understand them or this isn't going to work. You're going to have to understand where I'm asking you to go to and how to interpret that information, or this isn't going to work. So stay in contact with me. When you don't understand something, please let me know. You can email me. You can send me a text on my phone. You can call me. I will call you back. I will text you back. I will email you back. I'll be attentive as I can. So I think that's about it. What I'd really, really like for you to start out doing is just like getting really familiar with the website, the WordPress site. You can find the link to it on